everyone, and welcome to what will be undoubtedly a fascinating exchange. When I came in and saw a packed room ready for political debate, I thought, Jeremy Corbyn must be in the building. And it is the implications of Corbynism which underpins our debate. Michael asked me to say a few words to open this discussion of whether this is the age of political easy answers. And I think it would have been hard for us to imagine 12 months ago that we would be having this debate. Our debate comes in the context of a tumultuous 12 months of political events in the UK. This time last year, just to remind you, we were on the cusp of finding out that Scotland had voted no, a result that at the time seemed to be a victory for the status quo, and yet led to a catastrophic hemorrhage of Labour's support in Scotland. We were about to enter the conference season with polls giving Labour a 5% lead, and all expert opinion predicting up to election day of a hung parliament and a possible Labour-led coalition. But May the 7th delivered the first Conservative majority administration for 18 years, and although with only one UKIP MP, with that party getting 12 million votes, 12% of the vote, and coming second in 120 seats. And finally, over the summer, Jeremy Corbyn entering the race for the leadership 100-to-1 rank outsider, yet at the weekend winning a stunning 59.9% of the vote, bigger even than Blair's vote in '94. So, what can we make of these events? Will an anti-austerity platform and a reinvigorated and more authentic political engagement allow a healing crisis of left politics and sustain a serious electoral challenge in 2020? Or is this too simplistic and ignoring the easiest political answer of all, which is the economy stupid?
I think I've got questions actually to a couple of people. First of all, to Tristram, it's quite interesting that Labour convinced itself that it's likely to success through its social media, and as a member of the Labour Party, I think I agree with you. But we're told that Jeremy Corbyn has won the leadership via social media, so maybe we have something to learn from him, and I'll come back to that in a second. I think also that we've changed from a point where government represented people to the state to a point where government now represents the state to the people, and that needs to change, and that needs to be reversed, and maybe that's something Jeremy can do. But finally, I'm having difficulty with this, because everybody seems to be broadly on the same side or crossing the boundary. So I'm thinking that I might propose to these people behind me that we might consider putting in an official abstention by putting in a yes-no next to the final ballot box, rather than simply a yes or no. But actually, I don't think it's the answers. I think it's the questions we're asking. That's what we need to change.
Maybe at front here, and then I'll move to the back of the room. I realise there's hands there.
I think the issue is about populism. And populism has been something that's been around, you're the historian, but you know, anti-modernity, 150, 200 years. There's nothing new about it. There's nothing new about, I don't believe, I'd like to ask you, there's nothing new about the new politics. Heard it millions of times in my lifetime, never mind before. Partly agree with Seamus in terms of the, the failure of neoliberal economics, but the question would be, for me, is that unless we have political parties, and for me a very strong Labour Party that does not have Corbyn, as I see it, as I read the other day in The Guardian, as the Faragism of the left, which I think it is, unless we have very difficult questions to answer about those neoliberal economics, that does not mean I believe that like the 20 years of Labour government failed, because I saw generations of people who grew up and benefited from it. But we have to answer those questions. But isn't actually the new politics, these easy answers, just another form of populism and anti-politics? It's anti-politics.
Thank you. I'll ask the panel to come back and summarising. I'll begin at this end of the table and end up with Tristram.
the the unscrupulous mobilisation of people against fictitious enemies in place of the real structures of power in society, then I'd be inclined to agree with you. If it's actually a reaction, which is what I was trying to express, to a fundamentally broken system, a model of capitalism which has fundamentally not only failed to deliver, but has fragmented society in profound ways, increased people's insecurity, poverty across the Western world, massive levels of inequality, and not only that, but didn't deliver in its own terms and has failed in the most dramatic way, and we're living with the aftermath of that right now. If it's an attempt to respond to that, and the political elites that enforced that system for 30 years, and narrowed politics and political choices to such an extent, if it's a mobilisation of large numbers of people against that for political change, then that kind of populism, I think, is something that should be welcome. I mean, I think the distinction should be is whether it's about not easy answers, but real answers. So, I wouldn't actually regard Jeremy Corbyn as a populist. I don't think that really expresses his politics. I mean, he is expressing the demand, which is really profound in this society, and not in this society, for a change from this system and a change from this order. Now, yeah, but right now it expresses something that people feel very profoundly, and they're prepared to support it in a very strong way. It's not just here. I mean, you can't close your eyes to the reality of what's happening. These things are happening for real reasons. It's not just people are disorientated and they don't know what's happening. It's sort of patronising to say like that. I mean, the reality is people are supporting these movements because they want political change, and it's not being delivered by the existing political system.
What is populism? Populism, I think many people in Westminster use the term to talk about something that is popular with which they happen to disagree. If these new radicals, and I think we should call them the new radicals, if they are able to come up with an agenda that is based on not blaming the sense of others, that is optimistic, and that has a coherent chance of change, I think we could really, really make things better. Some of the changes that I think we need to see are things like a right of recall, so MPs can be sacked, open primaries, so we broaden the chance of who gets to be an MP, electoral reform, something I campaigned for when I was a Conservative. But, every time I try and raise these ideas in Westminster, I keep on getting this feedback from people saying, politics is too difficult. There are too many complexities. We mustn't allow short-term populism to get in the way of the wise experts who should be left to get on and make these decisions. And I think there's a reactionary, small-c conservative arguments against change should be dismissed. Can the Labour Party survive? I'm going to lose the support of a large chunk of you now, if I ever had it, and say I hope it doesn't. I believe that a disaster happened in the 1920s when a party, the proper Liberal Party, which I think probably went wrong in the People's Budget of 1909, but when the Liberal Party tried to aid Fabianism, it was displaced by the real thing, and I think that was a disaster. I see this as a historic opportunity to undo the tragedy of the 1920s, and I think that can be done because I think digital technology means that social expectations about what an elite can do for you mean that you will have a wholesale rejection culturally of the idea that social and economic affairs can best be arranged for us by grand design. I think there's a market for a radical libertarian party in the tradition of the Levers.
Thank you. Whether we like or dislike what's happening at the moment politically, as I tried to put forward, I think we have at least created the conditions for the type of debate that we need to have. And someone said, perhaps it's not the answers, it's more about the questions. Are we asking the right questions? I mean, I'm afraid I can't agree with Douglas. The Labour Party will survive. And not only do I hope it does, it needs to survive. One of the things we need is a really effective opposition. And at the moment, what we have is major distraction. Distraction sometimes, I mean, Mr. Corbyn is a man who just keeps on giving. The media is fantastic. the populace like. And of course, through this, I hope it gets stronger. I hope it gets stronger, because the alternative is actually bad for the country. An opposition that isn't effective is bad for the country, whatever way you look at it. So the two questions I want answered are, is Mr Corbyn electable? Question, who knows, but doubtful. And therefore, I mean, that will need to be addressed, and I'd be very interested in Tristram's views. But more importantly, can we get back to an effective opposition once this distraction is over, and how do we do that? So they're the questions I'd like to have answered as a non-politician.
Very briefly, so we can hear more from you. On the causes of populism, inequality is absolutely key to it, and I agree with the analysis there, which is a European phenomenon as much as a British phenomenon. And the Labour Party has always been on the side of battling inequality, but with the rule of law, with a parliamentary system and with the rule of law. And if you look at some of those who are so enthusiastic about battling inequality, they often look to Venezuela and Hugo Chavez. Well, that's not under the rule of law, you know, where you're jailing opposition leaders and jailing judges and jailing journalists. You know, what we want is the tradition of the British Labour Party, which is about battling inequality, social justice, but under the rule of law. And that is the Labour tradition, which I'm very keen to hold on to. What Jeremy Corbyn does do is as Liz said at the front, ask really tough questions about neoliberalism. And one of the failures, I think, from a Labour perspective, was that we didn't ask the tough questions about political economy. And everything Ed Miliband said is totally right about a failed model for delivering economic growth to the vast majority, which predated, you know, the recent government. And the Labour Party achieved phenomenal things in office, and I hate this delegitimisation of one of the great successful governments of British history, transforming areas like Manchester like never before. And we've had this grotesque delegitimisation of the Blair and Brown government, which paves the way for some of the radical left criticism. But what we didn't do was ask the tough questions when the times were good. It was a Croslandite model, and the financial services produced a great deal of money, and we put that into schools and hospitals and rebuilding the public realm. But when the crash came, we were over-dependent for our public finances on financial services, and we paid the political price.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the back of the room.
Yes, and Tristram says, would you mind saying your names?
My name's Charlie. Tristram said that one of the issues with the debate was that people kept it very confined. With social media, was that the debate was within a very confined set of values and people. But I don't think that is a problem necessarily with social media. It's with almost all debates. You look around this room, it's a very left-leaning at least, middle-class white audience. So, would you say that the easy answers come from lack of questions, from lack of hard questions, because of this confinement from debate? And if so, how do we open that debate out?
Okay, then
Hi, good evening. My name's Claire. So, in his introduction, Michael told us that the motion for this evening predated Corbyn, but when it also presumably then predated is the displacement of 7 million Syrians. The reason why I bring that up is I think that it was the age of political easy answers at one point, and then suddenly it became less about that and less about right and wrong, and people had to start thinking as human beings. So I think maybe we're just coming out of the age of easy answers, and it's time to start asking those very difficult questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, it's Steve Roman. Question to all the panel. Can you have anything other than easy answers with social media and newspaper headlines in a few words?
Okay, so how can we open up the debate? Is tribalism now being challenged and we're moving beyond easy questions and to a point of answers, and what's the role of social media? So,
Vanda, would you like to start?
It's a long time since I've been called Lassolini, having run companies around the world for a number of years. I think if paying taxes and looking after disadvantaged people is left-leaning, then that concerns me, because actually I'm sort of right in the middle, and I'll speak for my colleagues here. Do we have the right type of debate? Well, I actually agree. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, lady from Liverpool, but I actually think your point about thinking of as human beings is actually right, and I think we have moved on, and maybe the whole debacle of the last few months has made us move on, and therefore, will we end up in a better place? I think if we all engage, I mean, the fact that we're all here tonight and having this discussion is fantastic, and we're moving then beyond the easy answers to the harder questions, and it's the harder questions we need to keep asking until we get the answers that we need to take us forward. So, it's tough. Social media doesn't help. Newspaper headlines don't help. So I think we have to go a bit beyond that, and we maybe have to engage in politics, engage with our politicians in a way that we haven't done previously, and keep on asking those tough questions.
I think Charlie's point about whether social media actually just reflects a sort of normal confinement model is really, really interesting, and whether just necessarily on social media you're attracted to those people who you would normally be, socialising with or have the same views as. What I would say is just the nature of discourse on social media and the way in which it is mediated intensifies and accelerates some of those processes, and I think we've all sort of seen that in the media, and that, on the one hand, that sort of interactivity is incredibly powerful. On the other hand, as so much of the public, as it were, loses interest painfully in mainstream politics, those interested in politics seem more and more partisan in a sense, and I think that was just their attention to draw out. Claire, on the refugees and complexity, I'm now on the backbencher, so I can think freely. I think it's, on the one hand, I sort of agree that it cuts through, and we saw the terrible pictures and all that. But I'm afraid it is. I return to the complexity, because we've had these figures out today from Germany, which shows that actually the number of refugees from Syria going into Germany is around 20%. And the rest are from the Balkans, the rest are from Macedonia. And so, are they economic migrants? Are they refugees? And so, once again, it seemed a very simple solution to a simple problem. You open your borders for those fleeing war. Who could be against that? And yet, actually, it becomes a lot more complicated. And I think Chancellor Merkel is going to have to manage the consequences.
Tristram, I think the new politics of the Corbyn cabinet is you can think freely from the front benches now.
We'll see about that.
Charlie, I think you're right to talk about the fact that a lot of politics tends to be incredibly self-referential. And I hope that if I've made a change since I first stood for election in 2001 to today, I hope I'm slightly more aware of that conceit of politicians. Let me tell you, I mean, one of the great advantages of being the only UKIP MP in Parliament is our parliamentary meetings are quite short. We tend to have unanimity. I think they said that was being an echo chamber. Well, sometimes in the meetings there is an echo. Claire, I think, made a really important point. Social media makes us think that we have proximity to things around the world that are happening, good things and bad things. And I think we also need to understand that proximity, or apparent proximity to a problem, doesn't necessarily mean we have the power to do something about it. And I sometimes struggle with that, and I think that's something that is new to a lot of us. Steve talked about forgive me, Steve, I can't remember what you said, but I wrote down democratization of comment. I think that the internet certainly, we used to rely on newspaper editors and great newspaper journalists to inform us. One of the wonderful things about the internet is that comment's been democratized. You can actually find blogs that do actually provide serious, meaningful comment about the constraints of modern banking system. And I think that depth of analysis that the internet allows is a very good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, of course, there are big problems with social media and the way the internet distorts debate, but it hugely expands it, and it allows people to break the monopoly of the existing media structures, which I think is a positive thing, despite working for those structures myself. So, I just very briefly on some of the other points. I mean, one of the things that I find disturbing is that in relation to the refugee crisis, the role of Britain and other Western countries in the wars which have created a lot of these refugees is almost completely ignored. I mean, the most dramatic cases in the case of Libya, but Iraq, Afghanistan, including in Syria where there is heavy indirect intervention. I mean, these states have been at the heart of this crisis, and that dimension of our role in this suffering and this huge migration of people is somehow being lost in this story. The final point about the narrowing of the political debate or the being a left-right issue in debate. I mean, actually, I think one of the things that people should focus on in the aftermath of the general election is that most people don't consider themselves to be on the left or right. They don't see most of these issues in terms of left and right. And I think, sometimes people in politics, they think, oh, that's a problem because they don't kind of get it. Actually, it's not a problem at all. It's an opportunity for mobilising different constituencies, I mean, different social elements if you're trying to build an electoral coalition. So for any group, new Labour leadership, when you've seen Labour's electoral support fragmented in different directions in Scotland, and to UKIP, to the Greens, to the Tories in different places, or people not voting, actually that creates an opportunity that most people don't see things in that way, but they do understand their own interests, and they do understand their own problems that they face in society. So you can build support and discussion and coalitions among people who don't necessarily see themselves as part of the same political bloc.
But you're all itching for the answer, aren't you? I was a parliamentary candidate in the general election, and one of the great delights was going to the count and looking at the spoiled papers. The little messages. There was one that was sent to my Liberal Democrat opponent which just said, piss off back to Putney. I think she has. So it was a great delight having been the craftsman of tonight's question to see the spoiled papers. Where was the distinction? I abstain. What a terrible question. And, did anybody give a clear response to a relatively obscure question? So, they were the spoiled papers, but nevertheless, as the chief returning officer, it befalls to me to announce the results. Out of out of 141 ballots cast, 72 were for the motion, 69 were against. So by the very narrowest of margins, I do duly declare Vanda Murray and Tristram Hunt the winner. Tremendous spirited cause for their side of the argument tonight as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been part of Discuss Manchester. I look forward to welcoming you back again. Please once again show your appreciation for all of our panelists.